Welcome to all the IAM members and others who have joined the webinar now. Greetings from IAM Madras chapter. This is organized by IAM Madras chapter in association with IA India. The topic for today's webinar is fraud risk during pandemic times. There are two speakers. One is Ms. C.B. Jayashree, Associate Director, Risk Advisory, Deloitte Touche Tohmatsu India LLP. Jayashree is a chartered accountant with 12 years experience in risk and related services. Her focus areas: internal audit, control, risk reviews, and development of SOPs, governance, risk reviews, etc. She has assisted clients in India and global in identifying key control lapses, cost savings, and she assists in fraud reviews. Industries in which she has served include financial services, manufacturing, infrastructure, construction, IT processes and business processes outsourcing. She is a regular speaker in various events, in various forums. The other speaker is Mr. Arjun Pratap, Director, Deloitte Touche Tohmatsu India LLP. He is a chartered accountant with 9 years experience in control assurance, forensic, fraud risk management, internal audit, etc. He is also certified fraud examiner and certified information systems auditor CISA. He has aided clients in India and global in design and implementation of internal control systems, process definition and improvements. Industries served include technology, manufacturing, infrastructure, construction, banking, financial services, IT process and business process outsourcing, etc. He is a member of Core Committee on Technology Sector for Deloitte India. He spearheads robotic process automation and digital risk solutions. He is a regular speaker in various forums on internal controls, analytics, cyber frauds, and information security. With this brief introduction about the speakers, I will now request the first speaker to go ahead with the presentation. Over to the speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vidyadharan, for the introduction. So why this topic becomes very important, fraud risks during pandemic times. Basically, every organization, every country and every situation, we have had scenarios where if there is a recession, if there is going to be any pandemic, if there is going to be any epidemic, if there is going to be any situation like this, there would be certain amount of fraud which will start coming in. And we have also seen this across various stages of the economic downturns that have happened. During 2008, we have faced such kind of a scenario, and every survey or every other the surveys that are being conducted by various organizations have come up and said that, okay, is there a fraud risk increase because of this particular because there has been a recession, because there has been an economic downturn? Yes, there has been an increase in the fraud risk during these pandemic kind of a situation. So again, during this situation, again, we are seeing a lot of fraud risk that might emanate, and that is something which we are going to talk through during the current the session that we are going to handle now. Arjun?
Hey, thank you, Jayshree. That was a good introduction. And so, to put it in a nutshell, if somebody would want to, need to know a logic why that, fraud risks increase, you just have to look at the fraud triangle. Uh, so, any fraud, as per the fraud triangle, is perpetuated when there is an opportunity to do so, there is a pressure to do so, and when the person who is doing starts getting to rationalize the activities that that person is doing. So, in terms of distress, in terms of recession, or in terms of pandemic, or any such colossal event, uh, two things come up pretty much out in the open. One is there is a good amount of pressure, monetary pressure. There are a lot of operational business pressures. There are personal pressures, and then there is an opportunity because certain things, the way that they had worked before, when business was as usual, doesn't work the same way. So that there is an opportunity for people to commit fraud. Pressure together with an opportunity that there is a chance or a leeway to commit fraud is actually inducing people to do it more. So that logic basically works, and that's what we will try to kind of cover in most of the fraud risks that we are going to talk about today. Jayshree, quickly moving over to the agenda for today.
So today, the plan for us to cover in the next 2 hours, like 1 hour and 50 minutes, is we'll be covering on the pandemic per se, how a glance on the pandemic, what is the impact and what are the recovery scenarios that we have come across. Like, okay, this is a very early stage of identifying a recovery scenario, but since there is a resiliency and there is a resilient leadership which ought to focus on the future, we need to know what are the recovery scenarios. So we'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about the various fraud risks that have happened and what are the considerations for the fraud risks that you need to look for, and what is going to be the future, like the regulatory impacts. What are the for addressing these challenges? What is that you might have to do, and what is the future of the workforce management per se, and how the internal audit per se will see a modernization of the internal audit function itself. How are you agile towards the changing situations and changing pandemics? So that is something which you need to be aware of. So this is what we will be covering during the session today.
Yeah, and just to add one more point out there, now it is going to be a 2 hour or 1 hour, 40 minutes plus some amount of time that we are going to spend talking and without seeing people. So with less of audience interaction, it's going to be a higher pressure on the other side as well. So we have tried to put in certain pooled questions so that there is some amount of an audience interaction or an intervention that we can induce. This is a mute all line, so not everybody can be able to ask questions or speak. But there is a question chat box that is available on the side of your window. If you have any questions at any point in time, just drop a question over there. At some point in time during the presentation, or once we complete the presentation, we'll take it up one by one. And the poll questions are inserted or intervened at multiple stages throughout the presentation. There are around 9 questions, more of a survey kind of a stuff. We thought we will also hear, understand what is it that you have as a feedback, or what is it that you have as a perception in terms of certain amounts of risk or certain business scenarios that is currently in operation today. So accordingly, these poll questions have been inserted at various places throughout the slide. We will initiate it at the relevant places. All that you will have to do is, like, it will pop up on your screen, and then you will have to provide your responses. And we will see the results of the poll surveys as well, as and when all of the participants complete their survey, and then we can discuss on that as well throughout the presentation.
Sure, thank you for that. Yeah. So now, what is happening? What is happening in the organization, in the country, in the world, in the regions that you live in? The COVID-19 pandemic, it is unprecedented in many ways for our lifetime. We are seeing its impact on individual lives, the governments, the global economy. While the cities and countries are scrambling to contain the virus and protect their citizens, they are also watching the global markets decline deep down the neck. So that is what is happening through the pandemic, and we have seen this across over the last 3.5-4 months. So it started in the New Year Eve, and then it has been progressed, and it has been progressed to a level where we are all working from home. We are all working, not meeting people. We are not having any interactions with anyone, but there is social distancing which is happening. Still, there is a lot of things that are coming up, and a lot of items that we are tending to see. And I mean, this is a disruption which is in a day-to-day life for everyone in the community, the country, and all around the world. So this is about the pandemic per se. Arjun, you want to add something?
I'm good.
Hello?
I think the amount of news consumption during lockdown has been much higher. So people today have the number of cases on their fingerprints and fingertips, and how the economy is progressing and all of that. So we will quickly move on to a scenario or a situation that is going to come up after we resume to normalcy, or when we are trying to resume to normalcy. Rishi, over.
Yeah, thank you. So while we are talking about the scenarios, and we have the scenarios listed below, so listed in the slides. But then why should we even consider a scenario at this point in time? Why should the leadership even have a scenario defined, and why should we even talk about certain scenarios when we don't know how the pandemic is going to go on, right? So, but there is a resilient leadership framework which defines 3 time frames of the crisis: the response, the recovery, and the thrive. Thrive is what induces us to move into the scenario planning and scenario analysis. That is what we are trying to do here. Response is something which everyone are doing it right now. Everyone are responding to the scenarios, whatever is happening now. So that is response. Recovering, how do you learn to emerge with the changes? So, okay, people have moved to work from home. That is something which we have done a recovery, and people are still working, and there is no way that we have not been working, and we are emerging stronger as well. We are learning how to do things in a better way. So next, how to prepare yourself for the next normal. That is what is something which you are thriving to, and that is what the scenario analysis is helping us to do as well. So what are the scenarios, and why should you consider that? Which of your previous expectations need to be rethought? What prospects that seemed unlikely or years away could be accelerated? What might consumers value in particular in these different worlds? What are the biggest threats? The new providers, companies, business models, and ecosystems that might emerge, and capabilities, relationships, and assets that are important in these worlds. So these are the basis in which the scenario analysis has been started. And though we have started the scenario analysis, there are a lot of uncertainties also which are likely to have a significant impact post the COVID situation. What we consider as the 5 fundamental uncertainties are the severity of the pandemic itself, and how the pattern of disease progression is going to be, level of collaboration within and between the countries, the healthcare system response to the crisis itself, the economic consequences of the crisis, and the social cohesion in response to the crisis. These are the 5 fundamental uncertainties that we are likely to see post-COVID situation itself, right? So while we are looking at this, the first 2 items which I was speaking about is the severity of the pandemic, and the level of collaboration becomes very key. And these are the 2 critical uncertainties which will drive the entire impact of COVID-19. Why this is more important is because that is what is today determining all the scenarios, and that is what we are all trying to address. Every nation, every country, every government is trying to address these 2 scenarios, which are the critical scenarios. Sorry, yeah. Thank you, Arjun, for this. So what we have noted is there are 4 critical scenarios that we have come across: the passing storm, good company, lone wolves, and sunrise in the east. Or say we put it like this: the passing storm, good company, sunrise in the east, and the lone wolves. So how we have determined the severity, and we have just made a chart wherein like the severity of the pandemic, and the graph has level of collaboration on the X and the Y axis. And we've also determined the significance of it, lower the impact, significance and higher the impact and what is the marginal significance of it. So we have just given that, and this is the chart that we have come across. So why these four scenarios, and how these four scenarios are going to impact our day-to-day life, right? So that is something which we are going to so let me give you a brief scenario description, what we would need to believe that, okay, this scenario, this is what is going to happen, and why this scenario becomes very critical. And then let's discuss on how this scenario is applicable for the various organizations that we are placed today, and how the world of the organizations are thinking about these today, right? So the first scenario talks about the passing storm. Passing storm is something where the health systems are effective and political response is also very good, but there might be losses that the small businesses and the lower and middle income individuals might have begun to experience. But still there is a chance of becoming more, since active measures are all more coordinated by all the global players to spread awareness and share best practices. Their competence in the crisis renews trust in the public institutions as well. So here, this is a scenario where it just passes off. The economic activity rebounds immediately in the late 2020s. Recovery may be initially slow, but then it will speed up in the second half of 2021 as the consumers become more confident. Because today, if you see, all the scenarios are like, okay, am I confident? Are the governments going to give effective measures? These are all something which is in minds of every other individual. So now that we'll come out of all that, and now the governments effectively communicate the severity of the pandemic and collaborate with various other governments, various other countries, various other regions, and bring in the best practices, and also bring in the quarantine measures and mitigate the virus spread itself. So this is something which we are looking at. Once this is done, probably what we will not see is the second wave of the virus itself, which today people are talking about. The second wave of the virus, which may get identified, and indications may get, it may get resolved, and effective prevention and treatments are happening in the long run. So yeah, that is about passing storm. Then while we are talking about the good company is something where the governments are not able to handle the pressure, the crisis alone. So there are private and public sector partnerships which emerge, because okay, the large corporates and companies join with the government and they bring in a solution, a joint solution. So that is what we are talking about, a good company, where there will be new ecosystems arise as the companies across industries partner to respond to critical needs and drive the much needed innovation. Social media companies, platform companies, tech giants gain new prestige, and ultimately they shift the world itself completely to a place where it will be rebuilt after the crisis, right? Here, the recovery may be late. It will not be as late, as quick as a passing storm. The recovery begins at late 2021. Recovery slows early in 2022, and again, it will speed up in the second half of 2022. Right? The shift towards greater corporate responsibility is seen, with long-term outlooks leading to greater emphasis on investing in workers and communities. Business may take initiatives to combat the virus spread by supplying healthcare expertise and enhanced software and tools. The third scenario is sunrise in the East. Again, why East? The East Asian countries, how they had actually taken the pandemic more effectively. They were able to manage the disease more effectively is what it talks about. The China and other East Asian countries, how did they manage to effectively come out of the situation itself quicker than the other Western nations, like say the US, where today also we are seeing a lot of human, social and economic slowdown and the inconsistent responses between the countries. So the global center of power, which shifts decisively east as China and other East Asian nations take the reins as primary powers on the world stage, right? The ability of China, Taiwan and South Korea to contain the outbreak through strong centralized government response becomes the gold standard. So that is what everyone are looking for, right? Here, the economic recovery begins late 2021 with notably quicker and more robust recovery in the East. So the eastern part will have a better recovery because of the centralized government response. People accept greater surveillance mechanisms as part of the public good. China significantly will ramp up for FDI's efforts and bolstering its global reputation. East Asian countries emerge from the recovery period with less economic impact. So that's where we call it as sunrise in the East. The last scenario is talking about the lone wolves, where everyone takes decision on their own. Like every country does go on isolation. They take the decision for their country, and there is an increased risk of the second wave coming in. So that is what creates this as a lone wolf. So this is a scenario where no one is going to talk about, no best practices are shared. There is political unrest, social unrest, economic free falls, and so many economic considerations or economic society level issues that are cropping up. And nations will put strict controls on foreigners, force supply chains to be locally done. Domestic safety will become more important. So everyone will think about their own country per se, and they'll not think about the nation at large, the world at large, right? Here, the economic recovery will be at mid-2022 with diverging rates of recovery across countries, because every country will have its own level of recovery. So based on that, it might get delayed in few countries, and it might be faster in few as well, right? Government turns to be extremely surveillance and monitoring, will be monitoring tools. People will not be so happy because they'll have a lot of containment by the government itself. Countries will not work together and enforce isolation policies, right? They'll not be, everyone will be trying to eradicate the disease, but at their own states itself, right? So this is what we call as lone wolves. So Arjun, you have anything to add here? Yeah, okay.
You can carry on.
Yeah. Sure. Okay, as we were talking about the five critical the five critical uncertainties that we are talking about, the five fundamental uncertainties we were talking about. There are additional uncertainties also we explored from the society perspective, from the technology perspective, economy perspective, environment, and politics itself, right? So every situation, while we are looking at the illustrative here, we have marked it against each of the scenario and see how it is working, right? So while we are talking about the passing storm is where socially everyone are like cohesive. Every other learning possibilities are being taken up. Every other learning possibilities are being looked through. Like all the benefits, cost effectiveness, everything is being taken up at the societal level, right? Technology will see a lot of enhancement. Increased investments will be required, but virtual reality applications and it will be short-lived, but still there would be increased investment which will be required during this short time period. Technology, we will see an enhancement in technology because people use a lot of virtual technologies to connect with each other, right? Today we wouldn't have considered that. At least like there are certain cities, there are certain smaller cities which we would not have considered even doing a virtual connectivity to the various people. Now doing virtual audits, doing virtual reviews, during virtual discussions and taking decisions on financial, strategic, all these now are happening over the technology, and which becomes very important at today's point in time. So now there will be challenges in socio-economic inequality because, but it will be short-lived, right? There would be quarantine periods still, which will force many of the people to shut doors, but still it will again be short-lived, right? Businesses adapt to become more resilient towards future crises. Now people will know, okay, something like this happens, what I need to do. They'll become more resilient, and they would have prepared a lot of strategies and plans to take care of the economy and their financial stages. Environment, renewed efforts to fight climate change, which is a very critical, which is a sustainability model which has to be looked through in the future as well. So that is something which will be looked at. And politically, since every organization are going to be having a collaborative effort, there would be collaboration which will be within between multiple countries and best practices which will be brought in. So there will be more trust in the government and public institutions as well. Then while we are talking about good company, so here again the society shifts from more purpose driven kind of a scenario, and society becomes accustomed to more frequent telecommuting. Today we are not into that mode. Accountability for security and health becomes very critical, and online education will become more widespread. That's from the societal point of view. From the technology point of view, there will be techlash, so reversing previous trends towards embracing the technology will be more there, and innovation and virtual reality, AI and 3D will become a part of the regular day-to-day discussions, and we'll start focusing more on that. And online security will become a mounting focus, because today, while the technology is going to be used so much, obviously the online security also becomes very critical, which is something which we'll be talking through during the session. Economy, the prolonged pandemic rocks the economy and leads to a fundamental shift in the balance of power, right? And companies take some functions previously provided by the public sector and they revitalize the communities and prepare for the economic downturn. So now the larger companies will have more focus on how they have to take up certain functions and how do they have to revitalize their skill sets itself. Something which will be looked at. Environment, focus on climate change is mixed, with some sustainability minded companies partnering to drive forward initiatives. So not everyone will be sustainability focused. There would be few companies which will want to look at sustainability, but still there would be a lot of companies which they want to make sure that their activities are completed and everything is going and on par with the requirements when they are joining together. So everyone will have different level of thought process. Every company has a different level of thought process, which will, while they are even joining together, there would be some which they'll be making sure that it is happening together, but there would be certain initiatives which certain companies would not want to join in, right? While we are talking about the politics in the good company scenario, the public sector will struggle to contain the virus on its own. So they promote large corporations to step up and provide the solution. And this might actually see a decline in the trust in the government and the public institutions itself, because the large corporates are already stepping in to help the government per se. So that is something which we may tend to see while we are looking at the good company scenario. Sunrise in the East is something which has an increased emphasis placed on values such as public order and shared sacrifice, and all things virtual to become the norm, and particularly challenging for older generations, because today virtual interactions becomes very difficult for older generations to accommodate. So that might be a greater challenge which we might face. And today, even if you see in India, many of the states or many of the companies do not even have like laptops which are provided to all the employees. So they have faced a lot of issues while this lockdown scenario was coming in, and everyone had to work from home. So it was kind of a situation where everyone have faced this, and especially older generations it will be difficult for them to accustom to this kind of a situation. Technology
so I'm just chipping in here. I'm sorry, I'm just chipping in here. There was one interesting point made by one of the participants. Whether should China be actually, brought in as a sunrise in the East, considering, or should we even consider that the situation has been managed well? But it's a question you can answer either ways. Overall, the point of view is that so if there are newer ways of handling things, if there are better and efficient ways of looking at things, then that is one particular region or geography or an organization or a function, that is able to sustain. So from a sustainability point of view is what that these scenarios are being built in. And to a certain extent, whether there is pressure to that will drive an organization or an entity or an individual to commit a fraud is largely dependent on how these scenarios evolve. So where it's, for example, in a passing storm situation, it's more or less like the situation reverts to the original scenario before the COVID lockdown. It's in reality only a passing storm. Not sure how many geographies or countries or organizations are through this stage. Similarly, a larger set of countries and geographies would fall under the good company scenario, where there is active collaboration between the public, between the government organizations, between large corporations. So eventually, these entities or these units kind of sum up to kind of run the geography in future. So again, over here in terms of fraud risks during the transition phase, during the phase through which these challenges are being overcome, there are risks that would come up. That is something that we will go through as we delve detail into what are the different fraud risks that we are looking at. Sunrise in the East is more of a one-off scenario where few geographies, few countries have identified certain mechanisms that work for them. Could work for others as well, but then because they are able to quickly return to normal, back to normal, they were able to maintain their old productivity. They were able to maintain their old, in a pre-COVID situation where they were larger economies and they were able to kind of increase their capacity in a situation where there's more capacity demand that is coming in because there is a lockdown elsewhere in the world. From a lone wolf scenario, the biggest challenge is that today, if a geography or if a country moves into this lone wolf scenario, the supply chain is the global supply chain is the biggest impact that we will see in a lone wolf scenario. There are more pressures. The geography kind of limits itself for domestic consumption, and therefore domestic demand is what which will play more on these scenarios, and therefore where pre-COVID there was a larger dependency on the global economy. Now that was going to completely change, and therefore there's going to be a good amount of pressure that will build in on these particular geographies or countries. More importantly, the amount of surveillance that is going to grow in such a scenario is going to be much higher. There's going to be trust issue all across, but then that's a worst case scenario. Rishi, we will quickly move on to the detailed fraud risks and then deep dive into it.
Sure. So should we take up the poll questions here?
Poll questions, yeah. Okay, I am just.
I will do it for you.
No, I am doing it. Did I choose? Yes. So for the audience, you will see the poll questions popping up on your screen. I'm seeing that 42% have already voted. We will wait for a few more minutes for the rest of the crowd to complete the responses. So we have 66% of responses so far. 72% have voted so far. Okay, so the question that was put across was, do you think your organization is exposed to greater fraud risk in the current environment? So far, 75% of the respondents have responded. 45% or 46% have said yes, their organization is exposed to fraud risk. 23% have said no. Good. I think they belong to an organization which has better controls in place. 32% maybe. Okay, so far we have 77% of the audience who have voted. I'll just give a few more seconds and then we will wrap this up and then we'll move on to the next poll question.
Yeah, Arjun, while we are doing this, there is a question that from the attendees we have received. Does nature of political criteria plays a role during these scenarios, like countries having democratic politics vis-a-vis the country having atrocities? You want to take this?
Okay, so we will park it. I think I will again, place all this in terms of an opportunity that arises for an individual or an organization to commit fraud. What is the inducement, so that is there. And the other one is like, what is the pressure? Is there a monetary pressure? Is there a severe financial loss that is driving somebody to, look for easy money? So these two scenarios can arise in any polity. It could be a democracy. It could be a dictatorship. But then the overall ecosystem and with drastic changes, sudden free fall of economy, the chances are much higher. I think we would say it that way rather than pointing it towards more of okay whether it is more prone in a democratic environment or a dictatorship based environment. Okay, so we have 78% voted. 46% yes, they see their organization being exposed to greater fraud risk. 22% saying no, and 32% maybe. Okay, we will quickly move on to the next question. Jayashree, if you have anything to add.
No, thank you. I don't have. I think you've summarized it pretty well.
Okay.
Um,
I'm closing this poll and I am opening the next poll. Okay, now that you have good amount of you have said that you are seeing fraud risks or your organizations being exposed to newer fraud risks. The next question is this. %32 have voted so far. 60% have voted so far, and a significant siding towards the second option, external frauds. 69% have voted so far. 74%, 75%. Okay, we will take this as a cutoff. Okay, 75% of the respondents have said that the chances of fraud will emanate more from the external source than the internal source. 26% against or 25% against, and 74% or 70% from the external fraud. Another few seconds and I will close this poll question and then we will move on to the next poll question. Thank you for all those who have responded. Okay, this is the final question for this particular batch. Do you think your organization has implemented mitigating procedures to combat fraud in the current environment? Launched. We had 60% responded so far. %65%. Few more seconds. %74%. Okay, let's take a cutoff here. 74% have responded so far. 54% have said yes, that their organization has implemented mitigating procedures to combat fraud in the current environment. 18% have said no. 28% maybe. So not sure how many internal auditors are part of this maybe crowd, but yeah, good to know. Okay, that completes our first round of poll questions. I am closing the window. Right. Thanks for participating, and then Jayashree, over to you to move on to the next sort of.
Thank you, Arjun. So here now we are going to focus on the main topic, the pandemic, frauds, recession. Why it becomes very important, why we are talking frauds here. We did discuss this while we started the session itself. 2008, there was a recession. Surveys were conducted. Organizations were asked for what is the impact of the frauds that they had, and has there been an increase? Yes. 80% of the respondents have said that, have believed that there has been fraud levels which have increased in times of the economic distress. Likewise, during this situation, coronavirus pandemic as well, we look at many organizations facing such kind of a scenario, various kind of risks. So if you relate it to 2008 recession, the kind of risks or the kind of fraud risks that emanated out of the recession itself, they were very similar to what we see now during the pandemic. It's a pandemic also. So both are very, very similar to each other, right? While we looked at, okay, who does fraud? Is it the organization? Is it the employee? Who does it? So while we looked at it, there are financial statement frauds, which were the major frauds that were noted at, and there has been like the fraud costs were at an average of $8.7 million is what we were looking at during the financial statement fraud. It was done by a global survey was done by ACFA, and they noted that that was a major fraud that actually had come in. And they also did a survey on what is the occupational fraudsters do. Like, what do they do? Why do they do that? 42% occupational fraudsters are doing it for living beyond their means, and 26% are experiencing financial difficulties. Arjun was talking about the fraud triangle, right? So there is an opportunity, there is a pressure, and there is a rationalization of why people think, okay, I need to do the fraud now. Yes, I have an opportunity to do it, and I have a pressure because I am now in the economic downturn situation. So this has led to the financial crisis, and because everyone wants to preserve cash, everyone's liquidity is their top priority, so they want to end up doing such kind of activities are getting emanated out of this situation, right? So, during COVID, today, US has seen about 18,000 Americans have come across and said that, okay, we have been in the light of fraud, and there are about $13.4 million, which at the beginning of the year has been recorded by the Federal Trade Commission as the frauds that have happened, and that is the cost of the fraud that has happened. So these are basically have emanated from the it is from various kind of frauds that we see today, like the So the top frauds which have been categorized here are travel, vacations, online shopping, bogus text messages, and imposter scams. Like, okay, I show myself as someone else and I get money from you. So this has been a situation where people have seen lost a lot of money during this period. So why do we talk about fraud risk here, and why are we talking about in an internal audit forum about the fraud risk itself? Following the outbreak of coronavirus, which is COVID-19, organizations, their environments and their ways of working are evolving rapidly and in the ways that they had not previously envisioned. Like earlier, we never used to believe ourselves that, okay, we can even work from home. Now everyone are working from home. There are a lot of threats. There are a lot of things that are coming up, which we have not even envisioned. Even the organizations have never envisioned this kind of an approach, right? This paper, this outlines the view of what the internal auditors have to do during this kind of a disruption, right? That we are the third line of defense, and we are uniquely placed to play a very key role in the response to the COVID crisis from a position of good organizational knowledge and with a highly relevant skill set, right? We have both of it. So it becomes more adaptive for us, for the organizations. Also, we know about the organization, we can adapt to the scenario, and we can also do an initial impact. So IA functions have been playing an important role to provide critical assurance, help advise the management and the board on the shifting risk and the controls landscape, and help anticipate the emerging risks. So that is why this becomes very critical. Arjun, you want to add up?
No, no, we could move on. We could quickly move on. So we
So we
will
can move
kind
on
of now move to the second set of poll questions. Just a second. Which business process do you think is most prone to fraud risk in your organization given the current environment? So some of our fraud risk scenarios today are also based on these five, but then we thought we will just get a hands up from you in terms of what is it that you guys think. 25% have voted so far. Okay. 44%. 69% have voted so far. A good number of you are saying procurement and vendor payments related frauds will rise in the current environment, maybe because there is a lack of control or there is some dilution in control as there will be process changes because a lot of them start working from home.
Right.
And it's more digital as against cutting a check, paying, verifying invoices manually. Understandable. 72% have voted so far.
So only 19%.
Another 15 seconds and we will wrap this up. Yeah. 74% have voted so far. 31% are saying banking and cash operations related processes are more prone. 39% procurement and vendor payments. 19% financial reporting. 8% are seeing more risks coming up on the inventory process. 3% human resources. Okay, good. So I'm closing this. Thank you for this response. And, in your opinion, do you think a paperless office is less exposed to fraud risk because there are more technology controls? Yes, no, maybe. I'm just launching this poll. %54 have voted so far. 55. Okay. 58% have voted so far. I'm seeing some of you are responding in the question box or chat box. Please, put a note somewhere saying if you're not able to view the poll questions on your screen, which is popping up, then there's a survey issue. Yep. Okay. 72% so far. 74%. Okay, almost half of you think that a paperless office doesn't mean that the fraud risks are reduced. Okay, good. So 75% have voted so far. 31% yes, it reduces fraud risk. 49% no, not very less exposed to fraud risk. 21% maybe. Okay. Finally, do you think your organization has invested sufficiently in fraud detection technologies? We hadn't put the question as to whether pre-COVID or during COVID, but yes. Okay. I'm just opening up the third question for you. Good. Okay, this question looks more like a tie in terms of the responses. %60 have voted so far. We give a few more seconds and then we will wrap this one up. Okay, 72% have voted. I'm closing this. Almost equal number have said yes and no, and some of you have said maybe for this response. And then we will quickly jump into the fraud risk that we are looking at. Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Arjun. So basically, we are We have listed down the key risks that we have noted. We assume that we have seen that during the COVID scenario, and we also foresee during the coming post the COVID scenario as well. There is it's not in any particular order. The first item what we are looking at is in the financial statement or the financial frauds per se, insider trading risks, supply chain risks, contract review and evaluation risks, cyber threats, and other risks, all other risks which we have just collated and put it under other risks, right? So every organization, every industry would see different kinds of risks in these various scenarios. Like the financial statements or the financial frauds has been recently increasing, and there has been people have seen an increasing trend in the financial and the financial statement and the financial frauds, right? While we are talking about the financial statement, the financial frauds, there are so many new avenues that have come up. Like we had a list of financial statement frauds earlier, but now due to the COVID scenario and the pressures on the CEO and the management, this has become more increasing during the period, right? Again, insider trading, trader risks. Why this is very important? Because board of directors, audit committee needs to look at the insider trading and again, regulators are also looking for the insider trading risks. So what are the risks that the corporates today are facing and today may face due to the insider trading if they don't have adequate controls placed in the insider trading activity? And supply chain risk is something which every one of you said, like, okay, 50% and above said, like, 30% and above said there are supply chain risks which we have seen. Contract review and evaluation risk is something which has come up new because of the COVID scenario and because of such kind of a scenario where we see that as a growing up as a risk per se because of lockdown situation and how the third party are going to ensure that the contracts are being complied with. So these are some things which we'll address in the contract review. And cyber threats, again, every one of you have said, yes, cyber threats is a risk which, because of the increasing technology usage, we have seen a lot of risks which are coming up these days from the cyber, and the other risks which are ample amount of risks which are personal in nature, where you get a lot of charity scams and you see a hospital scam, you see materials like say duplicate materials which are being supplied, and there are other investment scams and all those scams which come under other risks as well, right? So just to move ahead for the financial statement frauds, what are the frauds that we have seen or we foresee that would come during the period? Because now the financial statement closure processes will be happening, there will be audits which are happening, and people want to close their revenues, close their numbers at a good level, and they need to show that, okay, we have adequate revenues, we have adequate profitabilities, and so on and so forth. So this becomes very, very critical, and these are some things which, as internal auditors and as the organization, we have to look at, right? Overstatement of revenue. This is the first item. Overstatement of revenue. What do you mean by that? Okay, I know that I don't have sales, but I still have to overstate my sales to show that, okay, I have met my numbers, I have met my targets. So this is basically this will happen. This will start from the top level. It is basically top down. So the top is saying that, okay, I need this number. It has to be taken through, and your financial statement should reflect these numbers. And this we have seen largely seen in auto industries as well. So we do audits for auto industry, and we've seen revenue boosting, right? To boost the revenue, though it is not got supplied. Okay, I invoice the materials, I recognize the revenue. Am I supposed to do that? No. I am supposed to ensure that the materials have reached a specific location, or as per the terms, Incoterms that we have agreed with the customer, that okay, the customer has received a particular amount, the goods, and then it is recognized. So this is something which was breached in one of an auto manufacturing company that we have worked for, and this became a big financial statement fraud. And it had a very big impact on their financials as well. So they are listed in India, they are listed in US, so they had a lot of work that we had to do to identify these kind of what is the amount of the revenues which have actually not reached the customer still has been recognized and it had to be provided for. So this is something which we need to look at, and your scenario analysis, your risk management framework should have scenarios pertaining to overstatement of revenue. This is something which you can look for, right? Then understatement of allowances and reserves, like you had overstatement of revenue. To increase my profitability, I do understate my allowances and reserves so that I have better profitability margins. Manipulation of valuation and impairments. This is again, I do a lesser inventory valuation. So I know that, okay, I do a higher inventory valuation because I know that if I actually did a physical verification, I would have ended up having a, say, 7% gross variance. But now, okay, I did an inventory verification 6 months back. I know that, okay, the valuation, I did not have much of a variance then. So let me use the same valuation today also and make sure that, okay, I don't have any issues in, I mean, my numbers are all fine and fair, right? That is something which people will tend to do. So that is something which we are talking about in the valuation per se, the impairment valuation and the impairments and the inventory valuation and the other valuations, right? So the next item is on restructurings and big bath charges. Basically here, because of the outbreak, there is a strong probability of outbreak related financial losses every company would be affected with, and every company would seek to write off their underperforming assets or record charges as part of their larger organizational restructurings, sale or closure of part of their business that were marginally associated with the impact of the COVID itself or not associated at all. So this is something which we call it as big bar charges or restructuring per se, right? Capitalization of expenses. There would be COVID related expenses which or other expenses which ideally would have got hit in the current P&L, but they would want to capitalize it and take it over the period of few years, right? This is also something which we have seen while we are doing an analysis of all our expenses, and we have seen a lot of frauds which are happening because they would want to actually increase their profitability and show up a higher profitability, right? Next is margin manipulation. Like we discussed about the margin manipulation per se, I intend to do a review of my margins and see where I can actually take up my additional where I see a decline in revenue or closure of plants, I see how I can restructure that and I can make sure that the cost structures are being revised and I show an increase in my profit margins. So it can be either a decline, showing a decline. Many companies are already experiencing a decline in revenues, closure of plants and all this stuff. So what I do is I try to show a reduce transaction fees or decline, increase the cost structure, decrease the cost structures and show a better margin.
So, right. So typically, if you look at when it comes to financial statement fraud, and now that interestingly the lockdown has also come up during the period of financial closure. More of it are tighter towards maintaining the top line, whether it is in line with the guidance that they had provided the market, maintaining the profitability, whether whatever profitability that they have been trying to achieve over the first 3 quarters, was there an erosion in the last quarter? Will that impact future investments? Will that impact future guidance? If the real scenario is something different, then how do they kind of cook their books to kind of get on to whatever is that they have provided as a guidance? I think most of these fraud risks that Jayshree has put out here all actually flows towards that, increasing the top line, reducing the cost, or increase of profit margin or maintaining the profit margin, whatever is that they had given as a guidance. Now, this applies to companies which are listed in the market where clear market guidance has been provided, where companies have been invested by private equity investors, venture capitalists, and a good amount of fraud risk around business valuation, inventory valuation. Inventory valuation takes more cause out here. The auditors are also finding it, a challenge to kind of decide as to how do they value those inventory, which are either being hoarded or which are either being held for sale, but that the inventory will become not saleable in the future. So how do they kind of bring it to the books and account for it? So when you open financial statement related frauds, it is a chapter in itself, and with the amount of pressure and adding to that, it has this lockdown has come closer to a financial book close. The amount of or the number of risks that will turn up is much higher, right? So how do we consider breaking this? Companies that have good corporate governance, companies that have sufficient internal controls. So when I'm saying internal controls today, that's a pretty risky term because these controls have been put in place for a normal business working scenario, right? And when you suddenly move to a work from home scenario or remote working, how do these controls operate? Does it follow the same sort of workflow which was initially provided for, or are there risks? Are there additional risks that have been overlooked, which have not been considered in a new working scenario? The time for organizations or companies to react was also very small, by when they will have to put in place certain controls, and the amount of pressure that they face from multiple sources, be it the regulators, the market, their own investors, is what increases the amount of fraud risk that come around financial statement. Jesse, we can move on.
So the next item is the insider trading risk. Why this becomes very important today is because we are all sitting in multiple locations. People are privy to a lot of information because it's a lockdown, and people are being given a lot of information which earlier used to be a price sensitive information, and it will be only available, a material price sensitive information, and it will be available only with few sets of people. Now it's open to multiple people. And now, since there are open, there is a trading restrictions, and we have a delays in filing of the returns, and it has opened up for multiple such kind of scenarios. So this becomes very critical, and from the point of view of an audit committee or a board, this is more critical to identify. Okay, these are the employees who have. Who know the confidential information. Earlier, the list used to be lower because people know that, okay, the internal controls team also will know that, okay, these are the people who will have the price sensitive information, and okay, this is what we have to look into. But now, in today's scenario, it would have increased, and that group of employees should be identified so that any controls relating to corporate insiders or adjustment of blackout periods because of the delays in returns and delays in filing of things, there is an adjustment to the blackout period also which is happening, because of which there would be trading restrictions which the corporate insiders use that as a way to do illegal securities trading also. So that's why this becomes very critical, and every employee is being given a code of conduct, and there has to be reminders which have to be sent because people are working remotely, non-secure or a less secure environment. Confidentiality of all the non-public information they may learn in the course of their employment would be much more than they used to be in a place of work itself. So considering the company should consider distributing the insider trading policies, and also look at revising the insider trading policies so that people are aware and people are having a understanding of, okay, this is what I am supposed to do and this is what I'm not supposed to do. And likewise, internal auditors per se should also look into the enhancing risks that we see, the newer scenarios that are arising, and there has to be always a consultation which has to happen with the legal counsel or the legal person in the organization, just to understand and see what is the information that could be shared, that should not be shared, and what is the level of information that has to be shared, right? And how it has to be publicly disclosed and when it has to be. So this is something which is relating to insider trading risk.
Yeah. So one thing I would like to add here is that companies should start considering even looking at their policies, because these policies wouldn't have considered certain scenarios, certain working environments which are currently in place. Therefore, the extent or the reach of the policy of the procedures may not be the same as it is currently operating right now. So, especially where there are regulatory issues, I think the companies should start looking at drafting or updating their policies so as to bring in some consideration for the new working environment scenarios as well. So these risks that we are putting across are not in any order. We are not ranking these risks. But if any of you feel that, okay, these are your top risks that you're looking at, maybe you can put it on the chat box. As we complete this session, we can pick it up as a point to ponder over and then answer some of your questions. That I think will be a little more interactive than the other poll questions which we are having. Just over to you.
So the next thing that we are going to talk about is contract review and evaluation. Okay, today every organization goes through a lot of significant risks. Will feel a lot of significant risks from the operational perspective, financial perspective, legal, compliance, and reputational risk, right? And even after the pandemic, they will face such kind of a situation. It's always prudent to understand these risks, and we start identifying, okay, there are contracts, there are specific obligations which have to be taken up, which have to be obliged by the organizations for various transactions, and the relationships are typically detailed in the contracts per se. So that is why this becomes more critical with the customers, with suppliers, service providers, lessors, lessees, supply chains, sales channel partners, creditors, borrowers, and other parties as well. So there are so many people involved and so many contracts that day in and day out every organization is signing, and we have a lot of business transactions and relationships that are being actually looked into. And this is across geographies, across geographies and across industries as well. So this becomes very critical. While we are looking at this, the key people who have to look into this are the chief legal officer, chief procurement officer, and other concerned executives who have to actually look into what are all the scenarios. Because of this, what is the operational, economic or legal risks that are coming out of these contractual obligations, right? While we were looking at this, there are certain clauses. We have given only an example of certain provisions and clauses which is more critical, and it is not limited to this. You might come across multiple other clauses as well, but these we thought as the critical clauses that have to be considered and looked into. So the first item is on the notice provisions. While we are talking about the notice provisions, we are talking about an event which is triggering this particular provision itself. When it has to be communicated, what has to be communicated, and when it has to be communicated to the counterparties with whom we have entered into a contract. Say, because of this COVID, I'm not able to supply a particular consignment. When do I intimate that? Or if I'm not able to actually oblige or complete a particular activity or a particular review because of this provision, then what do I have to do? When does it trigger, and when it has to be communicated? So this is relating to the notice provisions per se. The critical thing on force majeure clauses, right? This offers protection from an inability of a party to the contract to fulfill its obligations due to certain unforeseen or unavoidable events outside the party's reasonable control, right? When we don't have a control on a particular situation, like a COVID kind of a situation where we don't have control over it, and there is a lockdown which has been announced, and it has been announced a day prior to the lockdown itself. So there we cannot fulfill a lot of obligations. Say I have to perform a set of activities, or say I'm a third party service provider to an organization where I have to do an accounting for all the bills, and I have certain SLAs which have been defined, but I cannot meet my SLAs because I am unable to go to the office, pick up the papers and work due to the unavoidable event, right? This whether they can actually this offers a protection. This clause offers a protection for me to the inability not to actually fulfill my obligation itself. The disaster recovery and the business continuity provisions, this is very critical, which has to be in the contract. Say we have provisions which may mandate necessary steps for a supplier to take to mitigate a potential disruption. But these kind of disruptions are something which is far beyond the mitigative kind of a measure, right? Then what is the kind of disaster recovery or a continuity provision that has to be entered in the clause, or how it has to be actually maintained, and it has to be discussed between the contracting parties. This becomes very critical. Then on the limitation of liability and liquidated damages, where I know that, okay, in the absence of a force majeure clause, okay, I have, there is a specific disruption which I've noted, but what is the maximum potential obligation or a liability each party has to give, or what is the amount that in case I don't meet the obligation, what is the amount that I might have to pay for a damage. So these are certain things which we have to look into, and these are certain things which has to be looked in for the into the contracts as well. Governing
So
law
one,
or the sorry,
yeah.
yeah.
So Jashi, one classic example is that so typically technology companies, outsourcing companies basically, where they service clients in the life sciences healthcare sector or in the BFSI sector, they kind of commit to a lot of confidentiality clauses. If the customers are from out of the European Union, then the GDPR applies. Now, all these contractual clauses would have been put in operation by creating a secured delivery center within a certain premises where there is no pen, there is no paper allowed. They only connect through thin clients, so that access is very restricted. Now, all of this would have undergone a change because they would want to conduct business as usual. They would have taken certain approvals from the customers, but at the same time, because business has to run, not the same environment which was created for the purpose of the contractual agreement that they've had earlier will not apply currently. Now, in such scenarios, let us say GDPR has a regulation as to notification or notice of breach should be coming out within a certain point in time. For the company to even devise a mechanism and to know that in the current work from home scenario, remote scenario, is in itself is a challenge, and especially in cases where employees use their own devices. It will be through a VPN connection, but then I'm not sure how many of you know, even we don't even change our home Wi-Fi password. So it's as vulnerable as that. So contractually, even though they have taken some email approval or verbal approval from the customer, there are a lot of areas in these aspects where contractually the organizations may not be covered. They should have had initiated some discussion with their customers, with the other organizations, in order to kind of facilitate a contractual process to move into a work from home scenario or a remote working scenario, which in place would have exposed them much lesser than what it is now, right? Well, that's one example. Jashi, we can move on to the next one.
Yeah. So the supply chain risks again vary across. I mean, it's been standard even before the COVID scenario, and there are few additional things that have come in during the supply chain. So while we are talking about misrepresentation or collusion with various between the supplier and the buyer, these falsification of documents, substitution of materials, which we see today as a very, very critical thing, where someone was in the chat box also, someone had was talking about OLX said that, okay, they're going to supply the materials, but then they never supplied it. And there are, like this, we have also seen like that's more of falsification. There are also a lot of people who have gone in for substitution of materials where they have not given the right quality of the materials. They would have said an N95 mask, but then they wouldn't have supplied an N95 mask, or that is not available at all. But we would have paid for it. It is an I mean, most of the online service providers today talk about like, okay, you do an early payment and then we supply for it. All the prepaid orders are being supplied faster. So obviously people tend to pay for it, and finally you don't get it, but which is the need for the day as well, right? So these are certain things that we see today. And price inflation is something which artificial price inflation is something which we have been seeing lately, which is for the provisions that we buy, for the materials that we buy. Earlier we used to get it at a large discounted rates, but today we get it at a very lower, very higher rates, where we used to get it at like say 200 rupees. Now you get it at somewhere about 400 or whatever is the price of the product itself. So these are certain places where the price inflation has started because of this, and people have started utilizing the scenario itself. So this is something which relates to the supply chain risk. Again, conflict of interest becomes more critical here, because today, since most of us are working outside, there could be scenarios where we have conflicts of interest and that is not being identified at all, and there are so much of communication which is happening offline, which where we used to do it in office, and it's now happening offline. So that is also something which may end up. So communication and providing the preparedness or considering the risk scenarios is something which, for the current environment, is something which the organization has to evolve, and that is something which we should be focusing on as well, right? Yeah.
So overall, vendor governance is an area that organizations will have to look at. And as we looked at in one of the earlier poll questions also, I know that a lot of you feel that this is an area, this is a gray area, which is more prone to fraud risk. So if organizations have strong vendor governance procedures, when I'm saying vendor governance, this includes your raw material suppliers, your service providers. You could have even outsourced your accounting related work. Now, all of these processes, all of these activities pose risks at different levels. How you manage your vendor, and if your vendor is at risk, then that risk extends to you as well. So vendor governance plays a very significant role. If companies are not able to kind of seamlessly manage their entire ecosystem when it comes to vendor governance or the third parties, and that is a significant opportunity for fraudsters to get in and become a fraud.
Okay, someone has asked about the accounting mischarge and the accounting mischarge and the labor mischarge. Labor mischarge is something where, okay, I should have actually billed for say 100 hours of my work. Say it's an accounting outsourcing kind of a job, and where it is paid on a per day basis or a per invoice accounting basis or something like that, based on and you actually given a wrong input. Say you say that instead of working 8 hours, you say that I worked 9 hours, and that is possible in today's scenario, where people cannot even look at like how many hours actually a person has worked, and today that is actually a major concern for many of the organizations. So that is more from the labor mischarge per se. And while we are talking about the accounting mischarge, here we are talking about charging unallowable costs. Like say if the buyer wants to add few more additional costs, which actually not in the contract, but I want to actually add more costs, like say a freight cost getting added beyond the cost of the goods itself. So that is something which no one, which is unlikely to get detected, and it is hidden from the accounting team itself. So that, because no one goes back to review the contracts and see whether it is allowed, it's not allowed. So this is something which we see as accounting mischarge schemes, and during this scenario, this becomes more critical as well. So that's about the accounting and mischarge.
Yeah, and overall, I think the chances of collusion are fairly higher as compared to the pre-COVID scenario, because employees are isolated, they are connected with multiple people, and therefore the chances of collusion are higher. We are not saying that there is a certain evidence that collusion has grown or collusion has increased, but then the chances are higher, which might turn certain over a period of time. Yeah, and there was one more question on the effectiveness of a service organization controls report or a SOC report for third-party vendors. Yes, service organization control reports will help in taking some assurance on the level of controls that are put in place at the third-party vendors premises. But then again, we need to understand what are the different sets of controls that they have during the lockdown period, which will in turn have an impact on the financial reporting or on the business processes of the user organization. Yes, but then service organization controls will have reports will have a certain level of assurance that an organization can obtain.
Someone has asked about the business continuity. Okay, the business is up at all times, but then there are infrastructure challenges. We completely, yes, there will be infrastructure challenges. That is, but what kind of provisions have been invoked in a contract is what we were trying to address while we were talking about the disaster recovery and the business continuity provisions. Whether, okay, as an employee, you are having a business continuity, but whether you are dependent on a third-party service provider, whether he also has a disaster recovery on a business continuity requirement, which is there in his contract, and which has a, how does it get invoked, and how does it get reviewed? That is what we were talking about during the, during the business continuity process per se, right? Yeah. Yeah, Arjun, we should move on.
Yeah, we can move on. Okay. I think for a lot of people, cyber threats are, because people are connected virtually today. Cyber threats are one of the topmost threats or risks that come up, and so is the case that the amount of the attacks or attempts to attack any network or any environment has grown significantly. You must have read a lot of news articles. So increased distributed working. Interestingly, if you look at organizations again, a lot of them had to scramble for laptops because most of the organizations with key admin or support services teams working on desktops. So they will have to ideally move them to a laptop-based scenario. In the absence of a laptop, the closer option was like use your own device. You can connect to the organization's network through VPN or any other thin client methodology, right? Which they believe is more secure. But then, what about the antivirus or the security updates for that particular device that the users or the employees are using? So that kind of exposes, and even for organizations which have very good monitoring of what all devices that they use within the organization, the number of devices has humongously or multifold increased, because of which the monitoring capabilities and the bandwidth for the IT team is also much higher. So IT team today IT security is today more focused on managing connectivity, managing availability of IT resources at all time, and therefore that amount of time which they were earlier focusing on in terms of security has significantly reduced. Now, knowing this, globally these attacks are not restricted to a particular jurisdiction, particular geography. You get attacks coming in from Eastern Europe, you get attacks coming in from East Asia, Malaysia, you get your attacks coming in from Norway. So therefore the threat vector has kind of enlarged to a greater extent, and therefore your organizations have become significantly vulnerable. Not just organizations, even individuals, because the amount of phishing calls that have increased, the amount of various mechanisms that cyber warfare or cyber attackers use has significantly increased over this period of time, and rightly so, it is in the topmost risk. Organizations also follow a defined change management policy, where IT applications will have to go through a defined change management policy. Now, all those processes, all those workflow would have changed in a change scenario because they will have to have their business up and running. Some of these controls would have been diluted. Adequate tests before uploading new software wouldn't have been looked at. A lot of people, because they are working from home, because they have to also spend other time outside of work, they use the same laptop for downloading a lot of software, which may be vulnerable, and then expose the organization's data to a great extent. Large IT organizations are also facing various attacks. There is a Maze ransomware attack, which is in the news recently. Another technology company has been attacked with a lot of phishing calls. So therefore, the amount of cyber threats have significantly increased. Our digital footprint over during this lockdown period has also significantly increased. The amount of data that is flowing through significantly increased. The dark web or what they call as the underground mafia within the internet is quietly more active during this point in time. So organizations will have to consider arming their IT security team, kind of take external support, take the help of security consultants, collaborate much faster, much more, so that any data loss, data theft, any attack from an external party or sometimes even internal party, because the risk of a disgruntled employee also is today much higher. So within an office premises, the amount of control you would have had on an employee who is already on notice and who is little disgruntled is much higher when the employee is outside of the organization and with less control, because you never know what is that employee doing with the device or the data of your organization. So that way, cyber is one of the foremost risks that anybody should look at. Internal auditors should also, put a clear focus on technology related aspects when they consider special audits for this period. Jayesh, over.
Yeah. So the next set of risks that we are talking about, okay, someone has asked, like, would you suggest some controls to mitigate some of these risks? Yes, I mean, while we are talking about the controls, it might differ based on organization to organization and the kind of risks that each of the organization is actually facing. So majorly what the internal auditors are supposed to do is, like, they look at they look at their the ways of working. Earlier we used to do a sample based audit. Now you do a modernized, like, use the technology, understand, okay, these are the critical risks, and you lay out, okay, these are the controls that I'm looking at for the current scenario, and I start working out on the current kind of a situation on what kind of what identify the exceptions, identify the root causes, and then you do mitigate those risks. So sometimes there would not be a direct mitigation plan per se. So that is the thing. And while we are looking at the other risks, there are fraudulent websites or compromised business email. You receive a lot of emails today, phishing emails. So that is something which is very prevalent today. And emergency relief fund frauds or mobile app scams, where it's a inappropriate mobile app which you get which you download and you start using it. There are treatment scams. They say, like, okay, I'm a doctor, I'm a falsified doctor, or some person like that who's actually come in and he's giving a treatment where he is charging an enormous amount, but he's actually not a designated, or he's not approved as per the requirements. So that is also something which is coming up today because of the COVID scenario, and people go to the healthcare organizations on a very frequent basis. This becomes pretty much a bigger scam. And also we are looking at charity scams. Okay, say even PM Cares Fund. So if you look at an UPI ID over a PM Cares Fund, is PM Cares at SBI. But today there are a lot of fraudsters who create the UPI as PM Cares at HDFC, PM Cares at whatever, so and so, something like that. So this becomes very, very critical. This leads to a lot of people thinking that, okay, this is the right one and this is created by a bank, and I start doing the charity and I start giving my funds there, but then it is actually not the right account which it goes to. So what you need to do here, basically, people have to be educated on various emails, on the business emails that they are receiving. Okay, look at the emails before you respond. Do a background research while you're having an emergency relief fund or a charity scam, or while you're going to a particular person, do a background research, make sure that this is the right one, and then you go ahead and download an app or do a charity or an emergency relief fund, and check for any irregularities. Always, this is something which you need to look at on a regular basis, that if there are any irregularities that you're looking at, then that is something which you need to action upon, right? So what we do to mitigate all these risks, something which we need to ideally do is bring in the newer scenarios, bring in what kind of actions which will suit that particular scenario, and then put in that the controls. So these would be very similar to what you would have done in the past. Yeah, where there would be a lot of controls which you would have had in the past, which you would have done in the past. But in the current scenario, this becomes very critical to review with a new lens. So that is what something which we will be stating here. Yeah, Harjun.
Yeah, I think we will quickly move on to regulatory aspects, and then Jayesh, what we can do is, like, there are a number of questions coming in. We will take all of the questions at one go once we kind of wrap up with the following other slides. I think we are also short of time now. Yeah. So we'll move to the next set of poll questions. Okay, the first question is, in the current environment, with the focus being on business continuity, will you perceive any corruption to be of higher risk within your organization? Just a minute, let me launch the poll. 64% have completed. Okay, another few seconds and then we will wrap this up. 65%. Majority have 50% of the respondents have said that yes, there is a risk of bribery or corruption. Okay, we will wrap this one up. Okay, the next one is like, do you think the government should make fraud reporting mandatory for listed and public companies? It is already a mandate with a lot of financial services institutions. Even for the other listed companies, the auditors report any fraud scenarios. But for the company to kind of voluntarily go and report, is this the right time? Yeah. 52 have voted. Okay, there is more of a unanimous response to this. 98% have said yes. Okay. 95% have respondents have voted yes. Closing this. Moving on to the last but one poll question. Maybe for this time, the respondents will take a little more time to go through. As a result of COVID-19, will there be a need to update the SOX risk assessment? Okay, 25% of the respondents have said fraud risk scenarios will have to be considered in a revised risk assessment. 17% have responded to consider financial reporting activities. Around 29% is the highest, where information technology risks will have to be considered. 10% on accounting estimates, 19% on impacts from third parties. Okay. So again, we put in SOX risk assessment because SOX is an area where people religiously do risk assessment. But in general, any organization, it is recommended that they do a risk assessment given the current scenario, because the earlier risk assessments or the earlier risk management activities that they had performed would have undergone a complete change or a significant amount of change given the changed work environment. So even business as usual attains a different meaning today. The business models have changed, the way companies operate have changed, and therefore it calls for a fresh risk assessment. In some circumstances, in some scenarios, typically with retail companies, typically with technology companies, it is prudent to do the exercise with a zero base, to start from first and then see what kind of risk that they are exposed to. Right, Jayashree, over to you on the risk from regulatory aspect.
Yeah. So from the regulatory perspectives, there are a lot of, the challenges which are being faced by the companies are because there is no definition which has been given for a work from home. Today, we do a lot of work from home. What is work from home? How it has to be done? What are the typical scenarios that may come in? These are some things which we did not see today. And also there is no automated tool or service providers to update on the various guidelines and notifications. So today what happens is, like, okay, earlier there used to be a team which used to sit and look at what is the compliance checklist and what are the kind of new enactments which have come in, and they give an update on a periodical basis. Many of the organizations do not use a tool, or they also don't have service providers because they're not in place. So there is a lot of challenges which are being faced by the service providers. Likewise, there are non-compliances to some of the provisions because of the non-availability of online filing facilities due to COVID scenario. So these are certain things which has an impact on challenges which are faced by companies in execution of the compliances. We've also seen there are a lot of guidelines which are being issued by the Government of India and the state governments So on health and safety, there has been a lot of guidances which have been issued. RBI has issued a lot of guidances. Supply chain related guidances have come in relating to the APIs and formulations and the masks, and okay, what are the ban that has been given and what are the ban lifts that have been taken because of these scenarios. These are certain things which have been issued by the government. And what are the things that have to be considered and tracked globally is something which people have to look into. What is the data protection laws? There are a lot of global requirements that have come up because the year-end close was, they had an extended timing for closure of filing of disclosure reports. Likewise, India has also come up. SEBI has also come up with a delay in, late filing of returns. They have delayed it by a month. So that is also something which will undergo a change while we are looking at the current scenario and how the scenario is going to actually go in for a change. So here there are a lot of government enactments. We wouldn't have seen, okay, these kind of advisories even existed, or these kind of acts even existed in the past. But now people have started looking into the various notifications or guidelines, or specifically relating to a kind of a regulation. These are certain things which are coming up after a pandemic kind of a situation has actually put in place, right? The next is, what are the organizations should consider? They need to prioritize what are the high risk compliances, and they need to make sure that, okay, those compliances are being looked at on a periodical basis. Ensure the compliances through the process owners. Today, internal auditors looking at the compliances are also difficult. So ensure the compliances through the process owners. Monitor the effectiveness of the compliances and address any non-compliance areas and take the corrective action. So these are certain things which our organizations are considering. What we actually need to look into is to go into more of an technology-based reviews and technology-based, because today if the process owner says, okay, I've complied with it, but there is no way to review or ensure that the compliances are being met. After we open, and it might become very late because you would have already filed all your returns and whatever is the statutory declarations. So this becomes very important for us to track, report and monitor the regulatory obligations on a periodical basis. And there needs to be an compliance alert which has to be received automatically, and it should be integrated with the compliance calendar. Say if there is any regulation, there is an RBI notification which is come in during this period on the loan moratorium. Okay, how does that get updated in the compliance calendar as quickly as possible? That is known to a lot of people. So yes, it has been put in, but whether the compliance of it has to be sent to the various customers who are in the industry, whether it has been done, whether there is a notification which has gone to the respective customers or the respective originators, whether on, okay, there is a notification which has come in and this is what has to be complied with. There is a delay in, there is a 1 month delay in filing which has been given by SEBI, how that is getting updated. So it will not be a non-compliance, that has to get updated automatically as an alert in your compliance calendar. That is what we need to foresee. That is more of technology driven compliance monitoring, right? And there has to be a update service which has to be actually, I mean, with the service provider, you actually get into an update service wherein they give you a lot of updates on a periodical basis, right? And right, as relaxations and non-relaxations is something which we spoke about, and tracking of and monitoring of internal and the statutory compliances. While we are talking this about only the regulatory compliances, there could be a lot of internal compliances which also have to be met, right? There could be, like, say, ICFR, which is a mandatory thing to be closed before the year end, right? What is that the companies have done, or the process owners have completed their aspects, and if there are any observations, what are the kind of observations that have emanated out of that particular their process? These are certain things which also can be tracked through the internal monitors. So that is also available these days, and that is something which people have to start utilizing. And it has to be utilized across geographies. There are a lot of companies today who have implemented all the technology only for the Indian organizations, or if say they are from foreign countries or international organizations, they have implemented there, but it has not been passed to the other countries where they're operating. So that is also something which they have to look into, and that is where it'll become more of a technology driven compliance monitoring on a end-to-end basis. Arjun? Hello.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. So we will quickly move into what we are looking forward in terms of how situations will turn out. So Rajeshri had explained initially what are the different scenarios or outcomes that are going to come out of the COVID situation, right? So typically organizations have tried to respond. They had kind of immediately kind of put up all their employees working from home wherever it is possible. Where, for example, manufacturing industries, they have halted production, so such employees will not be working. Whereas their support services, their admin staff, and their procurement and other supporting teams would have started working from home. Technology companies completely virtual. Again, wherever they have infrastructure related challenges, where they don't have adequate laptops, where they don't have adequate devices to kind of provide to their employees, they wouldn't have been able to kind of continue their business. Typically with BPOs, for example, or the IT organizations, for example, they work on a shared shift basis, right? So they on a shared workstation basis. So the same desktop workstation will be used by 2 or 3 resources across different shifts. Now, if suddenly even the desktops will have to be provided to these employees, whether they have sufficient equipment, sufficient infrastructure, that was the question. And then how do they kind of make it up for that? Sometimes in order to kind of meet contractual requirements, they go in and purchase it from second hand, from gray market. That opens up a lot of other risks. In a number of scenarios, they've asked their own employees to bring their own devices and use those devices. How secure they are is a big question. And the policy procedure of the organization will certainly will become redundant when it moves to a work from home scenario, because a lot of organizations would have never even thought of a working from home option, which would have suddenly been forced to move into a work from home scenario or a remote working scenario. Like, how do these how can these employees be managed? It becomes a significant strain and a task on the respective managers to kind of take out productivity, to take out compliance related to whatever policies, procedures they have. And from a recovery point of view, so those organizations which are able to quickly adapt, quickly change their policies, quickly change their working models, mechanisms, are those which move in, which kind of thrive and which sustain. Those which are not able to kind of quickly adapt, quickly move in, or they have adapted and moved in with a lot of vulnerabilities in place. Now they are the ones that are either losing business knowingly, unknowingly. There are a lot of fraud risks that they have opened up for them. Now, this has taught all of us a lesson that this is our future working will be going forward. A lot of corporate offices will cut down in terms of the floor cost, in terms of the lease cost, and therefore a lot of work will have to be or will be moving to be delivered remotely. Now, if somebody from India can support US, then somebody from Tenampet can support the corporate office, which is working out of one another as well. So that is the model that people have slowly started realizing, and accordingly, organizations will change. Therefore, the dependence on technology will be much higher in these scenarios. How technology is going to change, whether they choose the right technology. Something as simple as like organizations, the moment they moved virtual, a lot of them started using Zoom without understanding the vulnerabilities in a Zoom scenario. And then slowly companies started reporting and news started flowing out that Zoom is not secure when it is not used with a password security mode and other stuff, by which time a good number of Zoom recordings have already come up online, right? So the rigor with which they choose what technology that they will have to go for, and what technology is it that will be suitable for their employees, is a strategic decisions for organization. But then these decisions have to be taken, and organizations are at the cusp of certain timeline, where they will have to quickly move on and decide how these things are going to happen. Accordingly, digitization is going to drive the way companies function. there is a light joke out in the business world that all along they were thinking either a CEO or a CTO as the leader who is driving digitization. Apparently, it has turned out that it is COVID-19 that is pushing organizations towards a more digitized world or a digitized environment. People have started accepting, retail consumers have started accepting online platforms. This was always true with a younger crowd. Now even the other set of customer profile have also started moving into online transactions with banking, with retail purchases. Now this again opens up a huge Pandora box in terms of fraud risk, because the level of awareness, as Jayashree has earlier touched upon, the level of awareness of the users of these technologies, of the users of these applications, will have to be scaled up in order to kind of maintain a very secure environment. Now, all of this will play in the future, or rather in the near future, as to how organizations adopt, how customers, how vendors, how third-party organizations evolve and adopt. Now, this will greatly define how, whether there is going to be an increase in the number of fraud scams, or there's going to be a decrease in the number of frauds that are going to happen, right? And how is internal audit going to adapt? Traditional internal audit, conventional internal audit has already come under a lot of question in terms of people moving into agile, people digitizing their audit function, use of analytics, use of computer-aided audit techniques where you kind of create preemptive alerts, you do predictive analytics to even identify a red flag before some transaction or before some significant amount of fraud has happened. The time is now. So if organizations haven't moved towards that, I think this is the right time that they move in, because otherwise internal audit completely becomes redundant in all these business risks that or fraud risks that the organizations are exposed to. So as much as the organization is moving into digitization, moving into adapting more of technology, so should also be the other functions, the support functions. And internal audit, being a watchdog, will have to also start moving into that direction in terms of understanding what these technologies are, putting in their viewpoints, putting in their apprehensions even before any technology is being adopted. Slowly, moving on to the space of information security, data theft, and other areas as well. Right. So with this, we will stop here now. We will wait to see what are the other questions that have come in the chat boxes, and then we will start answering them one by one. Any other suggestions or questions or any pointers that you would want to share, kindly update in the chat box or the question box.
Arjun, should we take up this question, which is already there, which talks about what should be the right approach to the following scenario? Company have an agreement with the contractor for a contractual employee. The contractor provides the contractual employee to the company as per the requirement. Primary responsibility pertain to the contractor and secondary responsibility pertain to the company during the lockdown. Who will be responsible for the payment of salary to the contractual employee? Is it the company or the contractor? So
this is a very good question. Go ahead, Jayashree. Yeah, I will then sum it up.
Yeah. Basically, this is, as Arjun said, it's a very good question. So here, we all are facing such kind of a scenario. Yes, this is an area where the responsibility, as you said, primarily is on the contractor and not the company itself, right? The contractor has been deploying the person or the employee to a particular company, but since the company itself is under lockdown, if the contractual employee is working for the company still, then the company pays. If the contractual employee does not work, then obviously the company does not pay for the contractual employee. That is the scenario that we see today. We do not see any deviations here. And if there is a possibility of an employment, yes, they do. Otherwise, if there is no mention specifically that, okay, I can terminate the contract at any point in time, I either terminate a contract or I make sure that this is the contractual, the contractor is responsible for the payment itself. And again, if you look at the contract, otherwise also the company pays the contractor and the contractor pays the contractual employee, and not the company does not directly pay to the contractual employee, obviously. So this being the norm, the contractor becomes the primary person who would be responsible for this. Arjun, you have anything here? I mean,
No, I think you've summed it up. But then I'm looking at it from a fraud risk side. So if the contract employee is responsible for any misdoings in the organization that he has been contracted to, like in a normal scenario versus in a normal scenario, these aspects will be covered in the contractual agreement between the contractor and the other company. Whereas in a COVID scenario, we will have to, on a scenario case to case basis, because the employee will be expected to follow and be in compliance with the organization's policies where he is contracted to. Now, if the policies themselves are not clear and kind of if the contract employee had abused that leeway and had committed some crime, then that becomes a case in point. Yeah. Okay. Its impact in the job prospects in the field of internal audit. Good question, sir. Okay. So again, this session was more around fraud risk, but then impact in terms of future. One is organizations have already started looking at freezing recruitments. So obviously, internal audit and other support departments being not a revenue generating department, they will be more curtailment in terms of these areas. But having said that, if the internal auditor is more prominent in terms of advising the organization, identifying key risks and controls, and if he plays a larger role as a watchdog, I don't think the internal auditor's role is going to be something that is going to be chucked out, truncated out.
Right. So the next question is on, do we need to change already approved IA plan by the board of directors in the changing scenario? Absolutely. We need to go through a change. Most of the organizations have gone through a change as well, considering the situation, because the auditors, internal audit has to give more of an assurance to make sure that, okay, all risks are being identified and all kind of scenarios are being addressed. So, and board of directors also would look into, audit committee will also expect us to expect the internal auditors to, in the current scenario, report on anything which has gone, provide more of an assurance than an activity of performing an audit per se. So this becomes very critical, and there we see that in most of the organizations they have gone in for a change in plan as well. So this is something which is very critical and has to be,
Okay, then the other question is like, may it be a new era of audit from blockchain technology? So I'm not sure if you're saying that we can start doing the audit using blockchain technology, or that we need to audit differently because there is growing blockchain technology use. So when blockchain technology typically reduces the need for an auditor, not completely though, but at least because there is a good amount of immutability in the transactions that are being recorded. Every node, everybody in the blockchain network knows the complete list of transactions, and therefore the need for an auditor is reduced. Over there again, there is a 51% rule where 51% of the nodes within the blockchain decide to kind of tamper with the data, tamper with the records. Yes, there can be a risk of fraud out there, but as far as blockchain technology is concerned, beyond virtual currency, beyond certain other use cases, this technology is still nascent in terms of application for a large part of the business operations.
Yeah. So again, there is a question on, do you reassess the fraud and business risks? Absolutely, you need to reassess the various fraud risks that can emanate because of the current changing scenarios. Say, relating to your user control access reviews, there could be a lot of changes because of people working in isolation, people working from home. You need to start looking at, there could be a lot of controls which have got relaxed. I shouldn't say compromised, I should say relaxed, because to ensure that the organization is working in line with the requirements. So those scenarios have to be addressed, have to be listed down. We need to see whether there is a mitigating action plan for it, whether there is controls which are being in place, after which the controls have to be tested. So ideally, you need to list down the fraud and business risks because of the change in scenarios, change in the technology, usage of the technology, and then reassess all your control environment as well. That becomes very critical. How MSMEs or mid-sized companies will get transformed from traditional way of internal audit to the modern internal audit, as the level of education is not that great. What could be the turnaround time, or say how internal audit make them understand to change the platform? Arjun, you want
Okay, yeah. So I think there is more a push in changing business models. So even within MSMEs, if let us say they are moving into some amount of technology-driven business, then the need for the internal auditor to modernize is also much higher. I think that is what will drive even MSME internal auditors to kind of adapt and modernize themselves. Because if you break everything down, when you're saying modernization, it all depends on the data, right? Now, if there is more and more amount of digital data that is available, how well you kind of analyze, how well you kind of slice and dice this data and then perform your audit procedures is what it really means, correct? Whether you can preempt, whether you can predict based on this data, and whether you can do some detective analysis, all of it depends on data. So if these MSME sectors are moving to more data driven approach, yes, I think there will naturally be a push for the internal auditor to also kind of modernize in order to kind of stay in the race. Yeah.
I think the last question is on generally what is the most of the agreements and like AMCs are renewed 1st of April, but now because the company is in the lockdown, new agreements will be delayed, and whether the dates will have to be as per the revised agreement date. I mean, the after the lockdown or during the lockdown. I think most of the since most of the companies are working, I mean, though it is not anything relating to fraud per se, but yes, we need to look into this when we are doing the internal audits. So they will put in the agreements. They at least there would be virtual agreements. Most of the cases are we already get into the virtual agreement stating that okay, from this date I get into the AMC, because any issues which happen during this period, you're still to be covered, right? So then this becomes very critical. So virtual agreements or virtual agreements between you, the service provider, and yourself will be there to ensure that this is being from the date of actually from the date of say if it's 1st April, it has to be renewed as on 1st April to ensure that you have all the requirements addressed and you don't have any issues because of the non-renewal of an AMC or an agreement per se, right? This becomes very critical as well. I think we just have so many questions. Any other questions or
that we missed? Yeah, or
I don't think we missed any questions per se, but
okay.
Let me look at it once.
Where are we on the time check? Let me just, okay, we're almost at 6 o'clock. Okay, I think we can call it a wrap. So thank you very much, everybody, for patiently listening. I know it is more like those olden days of All India Radio where somebody is just talking and then you will have to listen in, right? And as against a face-to-face or an in-house presentation or a discussion or a conversation where we are able to kind of gauge and see like what your questions are, and maybe people will be more vocal when it is more on premise. That's why we tried some of these polling questions, and I think these chat box related technologies are helping us out. Anyway, thank you for your patient hearing. Thanks, Jayashree, for running this through entirely. Thank you very much. Special thanks to Rohit Ravikumar, who has actually put in these poll questions, who had kind of had some internal discussions to kind of come up with these set of 9 questions. Thanks to Ravi Viraghavan for kind of initiating this whole exercise and helping us with the content and other stuff. And finally, thanks to Mr. KV and the entire IIA team. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
thank you.
KV coming in now. Thank you very much, speakers Jayashree and Arjun. Let me give a quick closing remarks and then we will close down. Members will agree that this lecture presentation has been very exhaustive and very useful. It is a timely presentation on the current scenario to the internal auditing community at these pandemic times. our members will be in a better position to take care of the situation and the impact which they can address for mitigating the risk. Thanks so much to both the speakers, Ms. Jayashree and Mr. Arjun Pratap. Thanks are also due to organizers Mr. Chanchal and Ms. Menas of IEA India from New Delhi and Mumbai respectively. Thanks to all the participants for active participation, including raising relevant queries and also answering the poll questions and making it vibrant and very useful. Thank you very much. Signing off, Vidyadharan, Programs Committee Chairman, IEA Madras Chapter. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.